Good afternoon. I'm Jack Carney at your service, and our guest this hour is Mr. Rudy Vallée, who's appearing here in town at a new club called the Concert House. And just before we went on the air, we got started to get involved in wines.
California wines.
California wines, which is, you say it's your hobby? Because it's kind of been a hobby of mine for some years.
The day after I met Mrs. Vallée at Lake Tahoe, 1944, July 4th, George Mardeacon of the Omakayan was to take me to Beaulieu, Beringer, and Louis Martini. I met Ellie on July 4th. I waited 2 hours for her to come out of the water because she reminded me of a girl that I was really with whom I was deeply in love. When she came out, I said, please, I'd like to go to Carney tonight. And she said, I don't usually go out with strangers or something of that nature. And I said, what's your name? She said, Eleanor Norris. I said, father's name, Harley, Harlie, or L-E-Y. She said, L-I-E. Where do you live? Berkeley is all I needed to know. So she tips off, and I go back to Carney, where I told the performer not to introduce me anymore, to make me work, to help him, because I put him in there. Emil Borio was performing there. So, Emil Borio.
Oh.
He did the Parade of Wooden Soldiers on the show in New York in 1922. Emil Borio, B-O-R-E-O. So I went back and I said, Emil, put me on. I said, forget what I said, because I'd done 2 shows every night, and Bones Drummer didn't even send a cocktail to my table. Nothing. I paid a check of $50 every night. And I said, don't. So I performed, hoping she'd be in the audience. She's watching, doesn't know I'm the guy that asked her for the date. I was in Coast Guard uniform. I was still in the Coast Guard. So I performed, and next day I called George. I said, George, I can't join you at 10 o'clock in the morning. Something has happened. So I waited all day for her to show up on the 5th. She didn't show. So when I got to George, it was about 8 or 9 at night. So we went, Beaulieu and Madame de la Tour had gone to bed, so we didn't see that winery. We went to the Beringer winery where George, and the charge of the winery took us through and loaded us down with about 15, 20 cases of their wines. Then we got to Louis Martini about 10:30. He was drunk in his own wine, reeking with garlic, showed us through his winery, which is built incidentally of 3rd Avenue Railway material. When they tore down the structure of the 3rd Avenue Railway, he bought $90,000 to build his winery out there. The steel structure they shipped to the West. And we loaded with his wines, and then we drove to New York and had a midnight dinner at the Omakayan, and then we drove back to L.A. A few weeks later, the Navy asked me to come to Camp Parks, the CB base, big CB base, biggest in the country probably, to entertain and direct their band. So I wrote a letter to the Norrises, and I said, I'm coming up. And she came home from the Rinda Country Club, and the mother said, hey, Rudy Vallée. She said, I don't know Rudy Vallée. They said,
well, how did you get her address?
I looked it up in the book. She gave me the father's name, Harley Berkeley. There it is. Harley Norris right in the phone book. So the mother said, open the letter. And she said, what's the matter with you? That was the matter that asked you to go to dinner that night. She said, what's the crazy? Because she came home and said that some Hollywood phony asked me to go to Calneva. Because she came back a second time to pick up something. I said, did you ever come down to Hollywood? She said, occasionally. And I said, I'd take her to the beachcomber or something. She said, it'd be very fine. She could tell her mother. So I wrote the letter, and she said, I don't remember what it looks like. So they get down in the rumpus room, and they get one of these old movie magazines, shows me the Palm Beach story. She said, I'm not going out with him.
But the little glasses.
Mother says, you're certainly going out with him. So I came up. I had 2 Navy planes, a Navy plane to pick me up, my pianist. We had 2 station wagons, 2 chief petty officers. The Navy took care of all of that beautifully. And the night before I did the show, I took them to Omakayan, and of course, George laid out the best pineapple banana fritters of everything that he usually doesn't cook anymore. Then I took them to Mark Hopkins, and we're dancing the floor, and she's in a little white frilly thing that the kids graduate, looking like nothing, no sex appeal. And here's this woman with a tight sheet dress with 5-inch heels, and I said, I hope you wear something like that someday. She said, this guy is crazy. So then I took them home, and next night I performed at Camp Parks, and I took her aunt and sister and 2 of the others. And after the show, I said to her father, do you mind if we go back to Trader Vic's? I said, if Miss Norris rides along with me in the car, and he knew what I wanted to get a kiss from, of course. And he fell in love with me immediately. Ellie's behind me going, no, like this. And he said, certainly, okay. So we get in the station wagon, and the chief turns the mirror up like this, very diplomatically. I pulled over, and she said, I don't think you should kiss me. We just barely know. I said, okay. We get to Trader Vic's. I paid. I didn't have to, because I knew Vic, when he was Vic Bergeron, when he had Hinky Dinks, 6,500 before he served food in 1938. So I paid the check of $50, $60. And I said, good night, Mr. Norris. Good night. He said, check the car waits outside. But I want to say, get lost. That's the story on that. So from then on, I've since visited Concannon, Wenty, Beringer's again.
Well, wait a minute. When did you get married after this? How long?
4 years later. 5 years.
4 years?
1949. We've been married 24 years this September 3rd, 1949.
You were not what you call a fast worker.
I was going with a beautiful dress designer from Columbia Pictures, who now married to Arthur Knight, the man that writes for Saturday Review of Literature and reviews pictures on the coast. Marianne Nyberg, who was working for Jean-Louis at Columbia Pictures, and I liked her very much. She looked like Faye Emerson, and I was very, very crazy about her. But she pushed me too often into that corner. And finally she called me one time and says, Rudy, she says, we're not getting anywhere. This has happened once or twice before. And she said, don't call me anymore. And when I came down to the office, I was making pictures for television. I had a little company. And there, everything I've given her is on the floor. So I figured she'd found a new sugar daddy, and I was really dead. So I didn't call her. And she's sitting by the phone waiting for me to call her. And the Coast Guard had a dance down at Long Beach. And I called Ellie, and I said, her mother, and I said, do you think she could come down? They said she'll stay with the Edgar Bergens and properly chaperoned and so forth. Fine. So she came down. I took her to the dance, and I never did call Mary Ann. And later on, Ellie and her mother wanted to go to Palm Springs, and I happened to be an honorary life member of the Racket Club and the Tennis Club, where I used to bring entertainment for them. And so they wanted to take it to those clubs, a guest card, and I got it for them. And I was just finishing at the Coconut Grove, my second 10 weeks, 39. And so the night after I finished the Grove, I drove down to Palm Springs with a friend of mine from New York and took them dancing to the tennis club. And it was there we really fell in love, deeply fell in love, and everything but proposed to her. And she went back to Berkeley. Of course, the day she left, she came into the beautiful house I had there, and I've got 8 or 10 beautiful girls around the bar that had been at an affair a couple of nights before at the tennis club. And she was so furious, she was so angry. She pretended she'd lost her ring, and I came looking for the ring, but she did.
Okay, don't rub it in. Where did you do it? I mean, ask. You pop the question. Was it in your
night I proposed to Ellie in our beautiful living room of the house in which I now live. Unfortunately, we can't show on radio. After I proposed to my sister, called me from Maine and said, Father just died. He went upstairs. He's 82 years of age. Never had a day's illness in his life. Went up a little cry, and he's gone just like that. And so I just proposed to Ellie that night.
Our guest is Rudy Vallée. You have a remarkable memory. I don't mean remembering these things, but you say April 1939, April 1954.
I was born with that type of mind, that's all.
I can't go back
in fact,
3 weeks.
Everything we have, we owe to our ancestry, and so few persons realize that.
Has it made you a quick study in motion pictures?
Not particular. I memorize quite rapidly, yes, but it still is a job to memorize a script, no matter how you look at it. There are various tricks and ways that some persons have adopted. Here's an amazing story. I gave Reader's Digest for Life in these United States. They've never used it, and this actually happened. I saw this ad in the LA papers about the Bornstein Memory Course, Bornstein. And he said, come down to the Ambassador Hotel any afternoon this week, and they'll give you a free 3 hours to show how the course goes. So I went down with all these persons. He gave us all Saturday evening posts. I said, any page. So we say page 19. He reads off the entire ad. And I said, this might help me in memorizing scripts and so forth. So I settled for the course. And the course is $95. 2 courses if you took your wife, say about 40% discount. So I signed up Ellie. She has no memory at all. Can't remember her name. No memory whatsoever. And writes so badly you can't even read her writing. And counts on the fingers. So we sat there. She's cheating like mad on my thing. And we went about 4 or 5 Thursday nights. And this guy was an Italian. His name was Dante. Big forehead. And he comes in like a bat out of hell. And he goes, boom, this thing, of course. And you don't get about 10 minutes breathing. And that's all out of 3 hours. And we really learned a great deal. And so this particular evening, Ellie and I having dinner. It was about 10 o'clock. And I said, Ellie, do you know what? She said, well, I said, we've got to go to the memory course. I didn't like that. I thought of it early in the afternoon Thursday. I forgot it was Thursday. We're having dinner in the kitchen. My kids are off at that night. And I said, oh, you know what? She said, I said, we've got to go to the memory course.
We'll be back with Rudy Vallée in just a minute. All right, let's continue. Our guest is Rudy Vallée. We'll open the phone lines in a minute at 436-7900, Metro East 397-8600. I have a constant quest for people who have known Howard Hughes. Have you ever met Howard Hughes?
I've been very annoyed that in all of the books, even by Noah Dietrich and all the rest, and all the appearances on the various TV shows and course where they had all the newspaper men talking with Howard, that no one has ever thought to come to me or to go to my ex-wife, Betty Jane Greer, and ask us what we know about Howard Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I had dinner with Howard Hughes, 1935, which would be 38 years ago. I can only assume that we had dinner. I was playing in Long Island, a place called the Pavilion Royal. I had a large 18-piece dance band at that time. It was quite a roadhouse in the outskirts of the city, in Valley Stream, Long Island, and I can't imagine how I was going with a lovely little Cuban girl, a dark-haired Cuban girl. That was my type then before I switched to the well-scrubbed American look.
Mm-hmm.
And Howard and I and the Mexican girl had a leg of lamb, and I showed about an hour of pictures of my lodge in Maine in color, silent, for him to see. And I've never understood why or how he came back and watched us play at the place and left about 1 o'clock. But Terry Moore told Ellie about 5 or 6 years ago, we had a dinner party with, and Terry was there, and she was one of his girlfriends, one very close to him. And he said to her one time, how does Rudy Vallée get all these girls? He must have liked either Fay Webb, whom I married in 1931, which would be before 35.
Mm-hmm.
It may have been Fay Webb. Somehow, somewhere along the line, I must have known a girl that liked me and didn't like him, and he wanted to see what made me tick, which is my only theory as to why we had that dinner that night, because I've never seen him again since, until later on. In 1942, I was going with a girl that looked very much like Ellie, the girl that I was crazy about. And I probably might have married, but I never did. And I saw on the newsreel screen 3 girls modeling the first WAC uniform. And they were all back to the camera on the steps of the Capitol. This girl turns, and the middle girl finally turns with this lovely buns of hair here and lovely white mouth, beautiful white teeth and lovely dark lips and sort of Chinese eyes, and she had this WAC uniform and looked very attractive in it. So I immediately made a note, and then the next day in Life magazine was a full portrait of the 3 girls.
Mm-hmm.
So I called a friend of mine at the Shoreham Hotel, not knowing she had worked there with Enrique Madriguera's orchestra. I said, Max Lowe, I played the Shoreham many times. I said, Max, find out the name of this girl and her phone number.
You could just do that. See a girl in the movies and say, I want to meet that girl, and you find her.
Well, wait till I tell you how the actor that had the wooden leg, who died a little while ago, the English actor with the wooden leg, you know.
George.
Anyway,
see him.
Let me tell you the story of the girl that married him. Anyway.
Bennett?
No. So anyway, I saw...
Herbert Marshall.
So I got the phone number. I called her, and I said, would you like to come? I could feel the waves of empathy and warmth over the telephone. I said, would you like to come? I said, I have an agency, which I had, a talent agency. We had Faye Emerson, Slapsy Maxey, Victor Borgans with the others. And I said, would you like to come to Hollywood? I'd like to represent you, and also like to know you personally. She said, I would love to come. I said, without your mother? She said, yes. I could feel this warmth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having on and off with Mary, this girl I was going to, this girl Mary, very crazy about her. And I'm now in the Coast Guard, Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard Band, and I'm allowed to do my radio program for SEAL test for another year, providing I don't go gold braid. I turn the money over to the Coast Guard Welfare Fund. I don't get anything for myself. I'm not allowed to keep it. I came out of the broadcast one night, and all the song pluggers are around me. And I'm talking about songs, and I hear this lovely voice, and I look, and here's this lovely creature in this lovely, listen to this, Kathy, in this lovely dress with a little velvet cap here.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, Mr. Vallée, I said, yes. She said, Betty Jane Greer. And it didn't ring a bell. And she said, you remember you called? Oh, I said, oh, yes. And what is your number? She said, Hollywood 1241. Down the street is a redhead tapping her feet that I picked up at a party last, took away from Mickey Rooney the night before at a party. A little bit on the trashy side, but there she's down there waiting. I know it's in the bag. She's down there. So I get in my station wagon, and I drive out to this high school where my band and I are playing a war bond drive that night in Alhambra High School. First chance gas station, I called Betty Jane. Dinner at my home tomorrow night? She says, yes. And she said, Mr. Hughes doesn't like me to go out. I said, fine, we'll have dinner at my home privately. So I do the concert. I drop the red. I don't even take a peck on her ear. Just gone out like that. And I wake up about 11:30 or 12, and I call, and I've got the right digits, but the wrong assortment. I try every combination I can think of.
It's Hollywood something.
Called RKO. I know that 1241, but I haven't got them in the right order. And I call RKO. They said, "Oh no, Mr. Vallée, Mr. Hughes doesn't permit us to give out any numbers of anyone." Just gone out like that. And I wake up about 11:30 or 12, and I call, and I've got the right digits, but the wrong assortment. I try every combination I can think of.
It's Hollywood something.
Called RKO. I know that 1241, but I haven't got them in the right order. And I call RKO. They said, "Oh no, Mr. Vallée, Mr. Hughes doesn't permit us to give out any numbers of anyone, especially the girls." And he brought her out for pictures at RKO. So here it is, 2 o'clock, 2:30, 2:45, and she's waiting for me to call her, and I don't know how to reach her. I didn't stupidly give her my number, which is in the book, incidentally, and she won't look at the book either.
You're in the book?
Yeah, always have been, all my life. So I get this call from one of the best song pluggers. He has the T.B. Harms, Francis Day, and all the great show tunes, Gershwin and all the rest. He's a high-class guy, very beautiful suit and everything else. And we chat about song. He said, "Incidentally, that girl last night, did you get the number?" I said, "No, did you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You're on the next 10 programs." So I called and picked her up. And it was quite obvious, without being egotistical from the very start, that this woman loved me very deeply and probably always will. I imagine Alice Faye and Betty Jane Greer, two women that I can safely say will always wish that it might have been. And we went together for quite a while.
Alice Faye?
Yes, Alice Faye was my girl band singer. I pulled her out of George White's Candles chorus and made her my
Before
band
she
singer.
married Phil Harris?
Oh, long before she married Tony Martin. Alice Faye was with my band and me on the road for a year and a half. Oh, I can tell you a story about Alice Faye and my birthplace in Vermont, where she's trying to get away from this guy to kill this newspaper woman that written a vicious story about me. So anyway, Betty Jane and I eventually were married, and I said, "Mary is still in my system," because this other woman had a very strong hold on me. And so anyway, we are married, and every time we go out after we're married and I see Mary on the floor with some Air Force lieutenant in a combo, I go out of my mind, and she sees it and I know it. So after about a year of that, we decided to separate. And then I decided maybe we could make a go of it, and I arranged to trap her in the office of an RKO executive. She couldn't get away from it. She was only too willing, but she pretended she did, and she's okay. So I took her back to her home, where she'd been staying with her mother, to pack her stuff up and come up the house later for a fabulous dinner with Earl Munson, two of the others, my friends. 8 o'clock, no Betty Jane. 8:30, no Betty Jane. I called her mother. She said, "Howard Hughes has come and picked her up. Kidnapped her." So she calls me from Balboa. She says, "Howard has let me call you, and he's going to bring me back." She says he goes around and hits the metal in the car with his ring.
What?
She said it's a habit he has. Oh, well, all the time we're going together doing the courtship. No, there's no courtship. I think she would have married me the second day if I'd asked her. And this is not egotism. This is purely fact. Every time we went to a movie, we always had to leave word of the mother where we were. And sure enough, at 10:30 down the aisle comes the usher. We go out the movie. It's gone. Get in the car, drive at the corner of La Brea and street where his offices are, where he was with Noah Dietrich. He had this big suite of offices. He owns the whole building. And I'd sit out in the car. She'd go up, and she said he'd sit there, drumming his fingers. Suddenly grab her right hand to see if there's a ring on it, throw the hand back and said, "You can go." This happened 6 times. So she called me from Balboa. I went down to the house where her mother lives, and I parked up the hill. He drives up in a small car, driving himself. They get out. They chat for about a minute. He doesn't kiss her, doesn't pull her close or anything. She goes in the house. He drives off. And I picked her up and brought her to the house. And that's the last time that I ever saw Howard Hughes.
We'll continue with Rudy Vallée in just a minute.
Still, finger looking good.
To get to that,
Our
right
guest
now.
is Rudy Vallée. We're going to move to the telephones. We have a number of people who
Let's get out where we're
We're
playing.
do the commercial now. Okay.
The
Hold on just a minute. We'll have you right on the air. It's called the
Concert House Dinner Theater.
The old
Substation 8.
Substation 8 is what it was.
At 8th and Market.
Right.
And the phone number for reservations is 436-7396. If you come for dinner, it's around $7.50 or something. That includes dinner. Then you come see my hour and a half or 2 hour show, or maybe 2 1-hour shows, each entirely different. Or if you don't want dinner, you pay around $3.50. At $3, and that entitles you to just come in and catch my show. And I promise you, if you don't enjoy the show, I personally will refund the money. I cut my throat right after I said that.
Good afternoon. Go ahead. You're on the air with Rudy Vallée.
Good afternoon. I'd like to say hello to Mr. Vallée and tell him how much I have enjoyed him through the years. I'm 63, and I'd like to know what sign he was born under.
All right.
You and my wife believe in that stupid nonsense. I'm a Leo, July 28th, 1901.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be 72 this July 28th. No, I don't believe. Although I must admit that the things that pertain to a Leo are pretty much myself.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty accurate. Ellie calls a turn every now and then some of these things. I personally don't really believe in. I don't think she does, but she's a very devout cat. She's very Irish fae. She's very Irish fae, very superstitious.
Now, are you superstitious at all? Never mind astrology, nothing.
No.
Never.
No.
You must certainly have known entertainers who were superstitious, because entertainers and athletes are the most
About
superstitious.
having the bed and all that, not going under a ladder and so on. I've not known too many persons. I've never probed them to find out if they were.
Mm-hmm.
No one's ever particularly. Eddie Peabody, let's see, Hildegard. No, I don't think Hildegard probably has superstition. Both women do. But I'm not particularly that way. I believe very simply, as I told you earlier, that nearly everything you are or hope to be, you can either curse or thank your ancestry. Mickey Rooney, in a way, might curse his ancestry for the physique they gave him that made him not be able to win the love of Eva Gardner the way a taller, handsome man would. And Cary Grant should bless his lucky stars that fate gifted him with a tall, handsome physique and a handsome face, and also the intelligence to read and utter lines beautifully and comedy and so forth, which is all inherited in his particular case.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't go to school, didn't train anyway. He was, as you know, a man that walked on the stilts and in circuses and so on. So few persons are willing, because it deflates their ego, to credit their ancestry. My father and mother, you see, your father and mother only give, if you study biology, which the average person hasn't, your father and mother only give you a very tiny bit of what is you.
Mm-hmm.
Then their grandfather and their grandmother. Way back here is the guy that popped out with a head of, my father had the full head of hair, so he gave me that. But my father never had the memory I have. My mother didn't have, she had a little gift of mimicry to a little degree. She could take off certain persons who spoke peculiarly, but she played violin just a tiny bit. But I have, out of the 7 gifts of music, I've taken the Seashore test. I rate in the 6 of the 7 gifts of music better than 100%. If the drummer varies one hair in his, even if it's a beat, and other things like that. Whereas in the creative fantasy, the art that Richard Rodgers has to a great degree, I couldn't create a really beautiful original melody if my life depended on it. And I'm not creative writing. Leave me alone with a tablet of paper to write a great story or a play for you. Come back 10 years later, I wouldn't have anything. I'm not creative that way at all. But in the other gifts, I have.
You have perfect pitch?
Better than perfect pitch.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Purely ancestry.
Next caller, go ahead. You're on the air with Rudy Vallée.
Rudy Vallée, welcome to our city.
You have a beautiful
I was
city.
just wondering, due to the fact that you're playing in the Gaslight District there, whether you might remember these words and the song it came from, and I was just also wondering whether you might be able to make a record of this particular song. I'll give you a few words. Give me your smile, the love light in your eyes. You recall what the title of the song is, sir?
When I was about 17 or 18 years of age, my mother took me to Cumberland Mills, which is a little town 1 mile down from Westbrook, Maine, where we lived. And this group of women, probably no particular, just a group of women who met maybe every now and then, had a lovely home, and I received $10 to sing The Sunshine of Your Smile. Yes. Give me your smile, the la-da-dee-dee-dee, ba-ba-ba-bee, ba-ba-bee-ba-ba-bee. Sunshine of Your Smile. I remember the song.
What happened to the Rudy Vallée memory? Where are all the lyrics? Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bee.
I haven't sung the song in about 40 years.
You can still remember the girl's phone number in Hollywood from 1943.
I remember the title.
Oh. Missed the lyrics on that one. Go ahead. You're on KMOX with Rudy Vallée. Hello?
Hello,
Yes.
Mr. Vallée?
Go ahead, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Was a chauffeur of yours many years ago when you played the Old Mounds Country Club.
That was 1935.
We were staying at the Jefferson Hotel.
1935.
and I worked at the Mound, and I
remember
picked
when
you
we
up,
went out there.
your band were out on a bus. You remember them days?
Yes, I remember very well. We played one night at the theater, then went out to the Mounds afterwards.
How do you remember that was 1935?
Because I was gifted with that. I tied in with the 2 weeks at Dallas State Fair, 35. I remember it's a tour that I couldn't forget because so many things happened on that tour.
Who did you meet at the Dallas State Fair that was tall and beautiful and short and lovely and lovely red blonde hair?
No. When I played a beach outside of Sylvan Beach, outside of Houston, that's where I met a very lovely creature who was half Indian. She had beautiful black hair. She used to go for the Polar Negri type, black, white complexion, beautiful red lips. But after meeting Mary, I became the Jinx Falkenberg type, the well-scrubbed American look. Like my wife epitomizes exactly what
Are
I'm
your
talking
tastes
about.
today still the Jinx Falkenberg type? Still
Yes,
the
well,
tennis type?
that's my wife. That's Ellie, the woman that the girl that I was crazy about, Mary, today. After we were married, we're at Cal Neva. I was performing there. And we noticed this tall, handsome fellow. He was sort of working around the place, taking care of the pool. He wasn't a pool man, but he was fooling around the pool. And I noticed he kept looking at Ellie. And one afternoon, I wasn't there. He came to Ellie and he said, Mrs. Vallée, you remind me, but you talk like her, you walk like her, you exactly. She said, you wouldn't mean Mary McBride by any chance. She said, how do you say? He said, Rudy knew her too.
Oh, I'll be darned. We'll continue with Rudy Vallée in a minute.
Why pay to
Our guest is Rudy Vallée. Let's go back to the telephone. Go ahead, please. You're on the air with Rudy Vallée.
All right, thank you. Mr. Valley,
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to get a hold of my cousin for a few years now. And since he was in show business, you might know him and where he's at. His name was Freddie Morgan, and he was with Spike Jones for about 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew any of Spike Jones' boys at all, practically, or Spike only just to say hello occasionally. And I'm afraid I can't help you.
Freddie Morgan did an album all by himself.
But speaking of musicians, KMOX brings to my mind something that I accomplished for one of your staff here years ago. I did something on radio here at least 20 or 30 years ago, and Al Roth was your musical conductor here.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked his work so well. He's such a fine musician. I said, I'm going to help you get to New York. When I got back to New York, being very close to NBC at that time, I was able to bring him east to NBC, got him a $1,000 a week job with NBC. Then he went with something else for a while and eventually wound up directing Milton Berle's TV orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
So when I think KMX, I think of Al Roth.
Al Roth.
R-O-T-H.
Mm-hmm. The Freddie Morgan call a moment ago, he made a record 4 or 5 years ago for Liberty Records. If that's any help at all, maybe you could trace him through the Liberty Record Company in Hollywood. Go ahead, please. You're on KMOX Radio.
Well, hello. I would just like to tell Mr. Vallée that I'm a Chicagoan, and I'm married to St. Louis, and I'm living here now. But I remember seeing him in Chicago. I believe it was the Palace Theater with Alice White. And, he was just spectacular with his beautiful white suit and his red hair. And everybody, the whole audience was just enraptured with him and all the beautiful music. And also, I'd like to say that in one of his radio programs, he had Rosalinda, a very wonderful pianist who later became the pianist on the Phil Spitalny program.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to school with her in Chicago, the Albert Sabin Junior High, and she was just wonderful, and it was a thrill hearing it on this program. And I just want to say that all these years, he's been a great favorite of mine.
Thank you very much.
It was the Chicago Theater, which I played 3 or 4 times, and Rosalinda is now around Las Vegas and wrote me for there recently, asked me if I could help her do something in some particular department she wanted to go into, but she's been performing somewhere in Las Vegas for several weeks.
Now, you discovered Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy, didn't you?
I take no credit for a lot of the personalities that were discovered in the Fleischmann Hour. I came back from playing the exposition in Toronto for 2 weeks with my band, the big Canadian National Exposition, and on a Saturday night while we were away, Elsa Maxwell gave a party at an old coward at the Waldorf Astoria, and Bergen performed that night and made such a hit that Monday they brought him over to J. Walter Thompson to audition him for the possible use in radio. And that would be about 1937 or 38 maybe. And I had come to Chicago to perform in the Grant Park concerts, which Petrillo put all these unemployed musicians in a great body of 70 or 80 men playing all types of music. And I came to Chicago with my quartet, the King's Men, to sing. And Petrillo gave me a beautiful $500 Selma saxophone as a gift for making the trip. And that night after the concert, he and I went to the Chez Paris. It was about half filled. It was a hot summertime. Nobody was there. And Bergen performed with his, I think, wife at the time, did the doctor act and so forth, and he used Mortimer Snerd because when I came back from the exposition in Toronto years later, about a year or so later, and they said very timidly to J. Walter Thompson, he said, what do you think about using a ventriloquist on the show, on the radio show? They expect me to say, a ventriloquist, are you crazy? And I said, who is he? He said, Edgar Bergen. I said, yes, I watched him work at the Chez Paris just a few weeks, months ago. And I said, of course, they said, aren't you alarmed about the fact that they can't see him? I said, radio is what you hear, and who cares whether it's a dummy or whether it's a live person or what? Is the result that comes to your ears interesting? Is it comedic? Is it great? Is it humorous? That's all that matters. And before the broadcast that afternoon, I said to Edgar, you're going to use Mortimer Snerd, the country dummy, aren't you? Now, he's a very timid man, so timid that had I said, that's the only figure I want you to use, he would have not used Charlie McCarthy. And the impact wouldn't have been anywhere near as great because McCarthy is the alter ego that all of us would like to dare to express, but we don't dare to really tell somebody off and say what we really think about something. Snerd would never have meant anything, but the instant impact of McCarthy was so great that after 3 or 4 more shows, we repeated in 3 or 4 weeks, he then got his own show for my sponsor, Standard Brands, the Chase and Sandburn show, which he was on for about 10, 12 years. I almost lost him up. But you see, I was smart enough to say this. I've always done this with my guests. I said, Edgar, you use the figure you want to use. Don't let me tell you what to do. This is your first coast-to-coast broadcast. You do what you want to do. I almost lost him up.
Weren't you working with the Barrymores toward the end of the Fleischman hour?
With Lionel. I mean, with John.
John.
We were doing the SEAL Test show. It started out in March of 1940 with an idea of Paul Henning, who created Beverly Hillbillies, Petticoat Junction, and Green Acres. He's a boy from the Ozarks, not far from you here, and he had come to Hollywood, and they agreed to do a type of format that I gave them. Are we getting close to a commercial? Shall we continue?
Do you want to take a minute out? No, go ahead. We're fine.
And I had created an idea, something like Jack Benny's idea, where you meet at the home on Sunday. Mine was the idea of a rehearsal, putting the show together, all the things that happened, that type of thing. Fritz Feller's my librarian, Vince Barnett is a Nance clarinet player, and a studio cops, Jimmy Gleason, Ed Brophy, studio cops, and it was that type. And they agreed to that. And suddenly, they came to me and said, Paul Henning had dinner at the Derby last night with the top guy of the outfit that was going to do the show for National Dairies, and he's got an idea of you play Captain John Smith, Christopher Columbus, all these stars. He's written all of them, 40 of them, beautiful, ready to go. And I said, what about it? I said, no, we want to do this. We started off in March of 1940 with a rating of 17. And of course, I said to him, you can get Alfred Drake, you can get anybody can play the part of Christopher Columbus much better than I. You're paying me $4,000 to be somebody else. That's crazy. And we beautifully written. Mary Boland was Queen Isabella. I was Christopher Columbus, the first show. Captain John Smith and
were they comedy sketches or were they straight dramas?
There was little comedy, all comedy, cute, with originals, 2 little songs written for each show. Martha Ray was Pocahontas, all comedy, beautiful and beautifully done. Rating went from 17 to a summer of 4. Slapsy Maxey was my retainer. I'd been reading Shakespeare. We spar. He knocks me out. Dream music. I'm Christopher Columbus. Dream music out. I'm back to Rudy Vallée in the last 2 minutes. That was the idea. I fall from a ladder. Somehow I go into dreams. Everything. Went down to a 4. And they're beautifully written. So they threw Slapsy off. They kept Paul on. And they came to New York and they said, Rudy, the show's a flop, but we're going to keep you on because we believe in you. Here's a list of 6 producers, among them Ed Gardner. Archie Duffy became Archie Duffy's dad later on, but he was just out. He was J. Walter Thompson, unemployed, flat on his fanny, out of a job. But I knew the man had great genius in selecting writers, guiding them, and comedic value. I knew his abilities. Even though I had a lot of trouble in Canada, where he substituted on my Fleischman for 2 weeks, I knew the man had great ability. I said, Ed, it's your show, top to bottom. I picked the songs. Everything else is yours. He took that show little by little. We got away from the clink in the armor type of character to Hatfields and McCoys with Dinah Shore, as one Walter O'Keefe, and that type of thing. I became Diamond Jim Brady. We got away from the old that thing to something more modern. It began to creep up. Well, coming back in September, and Ed said to me, what about John Barrymore? I said, Ed, I heard him on your Texaco show on Christmas Eve when I was going with Pat Dane. We sat in the car and listened to this gorgeous voice. And I said, there'll be days we wonder if he'll be there, but it'll be worth it. He took that show from about a 7 or 8 to a 25. What a pleasure to work with that man. Such greatness. He was so, I've got all the shows. And we're putting them out now. 4 of the best shows we're putting out on an LP.
Really? With Barrymore?
There's a guy down in Long Beach, an Armenian, that packages the old Fibble McGee and Wally, and then he gets them to the sponsor, who then puts them out at premium point of purchase. When you buy the goods, you get the album for $1.50, something like that. So I picked the 4 best shows. The funniest show, in my opinion, was 1940, The Vagabond Lover versus the Great Profile. I'm a Rudy, the cutie, the Crooney, patootie, the Vagabond Lover from Maine. You said, I'm Barrymore, the Paramore. I'm John, the Great Profile. That show is so great, so great, so great.
We'll continue in just 1 minute with Rudy Vallée. Our guest is Rudy Vallée. Tell about the last broadcast with John Barrymore.
Barrymore never gave us any trouble. He was never at any time that I know on the program to the point of anywhere. He had a young fellow falling around with a bottle of Sauterne. This kid, a little Swiss kid, a German kid, tried to keep him out of saloons. Only one night I came down, and I could tell when I got that 7:30, something was up. And I went into this room. It was dark. Gardner sat by him. He was on the couch. They'd been plying with coffee. He'd got away from the kid. But I said, John, I'm not the slightest worried. I know that you're going to come through like $1 million. I said, just relax, take it easy. He came on at 8 o'clock. Beautiful, did a lovely job. Never at any time did he give us any trouble of any nature. Then came a Thursday. I was now getting close to gold rate and would have to leave the program very shortly. I did the program with him for about, 50. We had Abe Burrows for $350 a week, Ed Gardner $500 a week, Paul Henning $150 a week for scripts. He's a millionaire today. Panama and Frank, Charles Isaacs, the greatest writers. So those scripts are fabulous. And this particular Thursday, by this time, Barrymore had to read seated. His ankles were very swollen, edema, all the water, which couldn't get out of his system because his kidneys just couldn't take care of it, and the liver couldn't take care of it. He was itching all over. And by this time, he was now seated in the chair to read his scripts. And the Thursday came that he couldn't make it. I went to the hospital. I left the broadcast, went to the hospital, and there he was, about an hour away from death, as I described the symptoms of Willie Howard and William S. Hart the same way, and an hour later he was gone. But on that program before, the Thursday that he died, he quoted, we had him do a scene from Shakespeare in which he says, what light in yonder window breaks? And as he read those lines, it was just as though he was telling us that it's about to happen to him.
Our guest today is Rudy Vallée, and we have exactly 1 minute remaining, so I would remind you again that Rudy Vallée is appearing nightly at the Concert House. If you heard the clinking of ice cubes here today, it was only because we're drinking iced tea in the studio, and I didn't want you to think...
I open tomorrow night, and I may stay.
party.
I may stay for another week because the reservations are pouring in, so that since we've done all of this pre-advertising that I'm going to be here, and I didn't open until tomorrow night because the place wasn't quite completed, I may stay another week.
What's the telephone number? I've forgotten. You've got
436-7396.
Our guest has been Rudy Vallée. I'm Jack Carney at your service.